So the next and final element of the BEETZ model is the what we'll talk about as Zeal. We've talked about brokering, embeddedness, experimentation, targeting of high doses, and now this idea of zeal in all practice kind of brings it all together. And so today I would like to talk about zeal not just as its own separate thing, but how it relates to the other aspects of the model. You've probably heard the word zeal before. This is actually a simple definition of it: a strong interest, a strong feeling of interest and enthusiasm that makes someone very eager or determined to do something. We've heard synonyms used like a passion, enthusiasm, commitment, that we often talk about in sports, about a player or a coach who has great passion. I think zeal is very similar, but maybe a little bit different from some of those, and I want to talk about that in this last section here. You hear the word a lot when it comes to someone going to work or even on teams about the idea of like punching the clock, about how we, you can use that either in a negative or in a positive way. On a positive note, someone who punches the clock on a team, like a player on a team or even a coach, is someone who is dependable, who is kind of has a workman-like attitude, who's there every day and is going to be there, going to put in the hours, going to put in the work, is consistent and is present. And that is a really good thing. That's a very positive way of looking at kind of punching the clock as it relates to sports. We know that to get excellent in sport, to improve in our skills, to improve as a team, this is a very big deal that we have to put in the time, we have to put in the hours, and that's part of the grind of the games that we teach and that we compete in. We also know that if it's only a grind, if it's only punching the clock, if it's only kind of mundane and just like something that we feel like we have to do, that is not necessarily a good thing, that there's got to be more to it than just punching the clock. And some of the best coaches, some of the best coaching practice we see is that coaching and that competition type that is not just punching the clock, but it's something we could refer to as kind of more of like a fighting for the good, like a fighting for something bigger than ourselves, a commitment to a team, a commitment to a group, a commitment to self and collective actualization. So when I talk about zeal, this is kind of what I'm talking about. What we found over the years is those greatest coaches are those that are able to kind of recognize the importance of the punching of the clock, meaning putting in the hours, going through the grind, but also are able to foster something bigger on their team. This is an aspect of culture. This is an aspect of developing a culture on a team that is marked by enthusiasm, it's marked by passion, but it's marked by something where those who are a member of the team are fighting for the good. What I say here, meaning fighting for the good of the whole, not just looking out for themselves, not just looking to see what individuals will get out of it. And not even just to win, but to win and to become better people, become better groups. That's what we're talking about with zeal in this last aspect of the model. We've all probably seen Coach Harbaugh before, and some of us may have had experiences with him and even played for him or worked with him or heard him speak or seen him on TV. And one thing that's somewhat unmistakable about him is his enthusiasm and his passion for his work. He's had lots of success in lots of different places. I once heard him give a talk, and he was talking about how one of his mottos, in addition to others that was passed on from his father to him and his brothers, I've heard multiple phrases that he's used, but one is that they were told each day to approach each day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Again, to approach each day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. I once heard him ask, what was the best what was the best advice you ever got? And that was the best advice he ever got. I think he got it from his father, who was a coach. So this is part of it. And so when, if you watch him coach or you hear him give a talk, he's got great enthusiasm. This is part of the deal. I think there's a fine line between that, the enthusiasm of the coach, and the development of zeal on a team, or of passion, enthusiasm on a team. Coach Harbaugh is obviously very skilled and he's an outstanding coach in many ways. But we've all probably also experienced coaches who have great enthusiasm, and maybe they give us the rah-rah Newt Rockne speech every practice, every game. And after a certain amount of time, those types of speeches, the heartfelt speeches or the screaming or the whatever it is, that starts to kind of not mean so much if there's not more to it. I would imagine everyone who's been a part of a team for a number of years has experienced that kind of phenomenon. I want to use a couple of, these are probably pretty bad metaphors, but they struck me. You'll probably think this is a weird metaphor, but it's one that I think of when I see this picture. If you go around fitness facilities or even places where people work out a lot, sometimes you see these like in the bathroom, and it's kind of a hydration chart, and it shows the color of your urine, what color it is. Again, weird example, but one I think I can visualize it relating to this idea of zeal and enthusiasm. If your urine is the color of the top of the chart, you're doing okay. You're well hydrated, you're drinking enough, everything's good. But if you're down at the bottom level, it says drink 2 bottles of water right now, and maybe even see a doctor. I think sometimes with this chart makes me think of like the way a lot of us have been exposed to coaching, and here's what I mean. A lot of coaches, if you think of their speeches or their enthusiasm or their energy as being like water, they are feeding their teams water or giving them water, hydrating them, as if they're in a constant state of dehydration, right? They're continually kind of spewing forth maxims or kind of passionate speeches, again, as if everyone in the room needs to just completely keep inhaling water, as if what they have to say is dire and is critical at this moment. Well, at a certain point, if you think again about hydration, if we keep drinking water, if we keep drinking it, yes, at times we are a little bit dehydrated, and at times we need to drink a little more water, but we have to know when that is. If we're drinking water nonstop, at some point it just goes right through us, right? And it doesn't necessarily make us healthier or make us more hydrated. It just goes right through us because we're already saturated, we're already hydrated. A lot of, if again, think about the metaphor as it relates to coaches and talking. How much coaches talk, and how much coaches give speeches, and how much coaches are directing things at everyone around them. At a certain point, we get saturated. On our teams, we get saturated. We get hydrated with the words of the coach. And we need to know when it's time to kind of not hydrate our team with our wisdom as coaches. And so think about this chart. Yes, we want everyone to be hydrated. We want our teams to be full of knowledge and understanding. But we also need to recognize when is too much. One more metaphor, and I think this one is maybe the better one to think about as coaches. If you own a home, or if you live in a home or an apartment, and you look around and you see you have heating vents around, in the house where the heat comes out. In a cold winter, you need the heat to come out. But there also are cold air return vents in our homes. And a cold air return vent doesn't have, you don't open and close it. It's there to suck in the kind of old air in the room. It's there to kind of help circulate the air in our rooms so that it's not just kind of the same stale air. I am stepping outside my expertise here, but I'm speaking very broadly, that it helps the flow of air in a room. The air comes in through the heat vent into the room to keep the air warm, but then it filters back out through the cold air return in the room, these vents that we see. If we don't have a cold air return in our rooms, the air can get very stagnant, and it can be you can be very inefficient in the way you heat your home. And in fact, the whole kind of furnace can break down if the air is not circulating. The furnace starts working too hard. It gets more expensive. It just doesn't work as well. That it's designed to kind of flow through. Well, I think we can think about this again as a metaphor on our teams in terms of what comes out of us as coaches and what we take in. We need both. We need both heating vents in our systems, meaning we need to spread the heat out, meaning our words need to go out. But we also need intake throughout. We need cold air returns. We need to balance out the air in the room. I think we often think about what we deliver as coaches in our teams. We think about what our coaches and our assistants and other kind of adults who are in charge deliver, but we often don't think about how we're taking the air back in, meaning what do others think? What are our feedback mechanisms to help this all be more efficient and more responsive? It's like a cold air return. So I like to think of a little equilibrium in every room, and on every team. There should be. This is something we've seen in some of the best coaches we've studied over the years, is that there is a bit of an equilibrium. And what I am not saying here, first of all, is that teams should be a democracy, or that the players should have as much say in things as the coaches. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that if all of the kind of verbal energy and all of the ideas and everything is a one-way transaction depositing into a room, and there's no release valves, there's no place for players or other team members or other organizational members to return what they think or what they experience, then we're missing. We're at risk there. So coaches can still lead with great strength and with great direction, but they need to build in mechanisms where people can vent, where people can talk, where people can express their opinion on a team. And this is not unique to sport teams. We can see this also in organizations, the way organizations work. If we run a really kind of tight top-down organization where there's no feedback mechanisms for those who are not in charge, we're cruising for a bruising in that way. Things are not going to go well. So the big point with Zeal here is that Zeal is not just the coach who's in front of the room and giving the passionate talk. That can be part of it. That can be part of it. Zeal is fostered by context. When we study the best teams, when we study the best organizations, we see that those that go beyond just punching the clock are places that have contexts that foster passion, contexts, settings, rules, procedures that foster zeal, bring about passion, enthusiasm, and commitment. We can't just assume that everyone comes to our teams in our organizations, completely fired up about everything we're going to do. It's just not realistic. So here's a reflection question. You think about with your teams that you experience now, an organization you're in now, or one that you would aspire to lead. What conditions in your team or organization foster When I say foster, I mean bring about enthusiasm, passion, engagement, commitment, efficacy, hope, and love. These are some of the earmarks of a great team or organization. How do we foster these things? A simpler way to ask that is to say, what conditions in your team or organization foster zeal? You know, what I think is that all of the things that this model that we've learned about over the years talks about, these are the conditions that foster zeal, right? If we think very specifically about brokering, about how we foster connections on our teams, if we talk about targeting the high doses, embedding, experimenting, all of these things foster zeal because they foster buy-in. They foster a culture of people who care and who care beyond themselves. They care about the good of the group. If we feel like we're allowed to try things, we get more invested. If we feel like we are embedded or we get to interact with a coach. As a player, I get to see the coach. I get to talk to her. That fosters zeal. She is embedded in where we are working together. If coaches are paying close attention to these high dose things that we've talked about in this model, these in between times, before, between, and after, if coaches pay attention to those things, zeal is fostered. These are not cure-alls for coaching. You need to know what you're talking about in your sport. You need to be a good instructor. You need to have a good staff. You need to have good players to have a successful team. But this model gets at everyday practices, every day with zeal, and with the idea that the everyday beats in our team or organization, these things we've talked about, will really affect the success of the team, but they will affect the opportunities of those we serve. They'll affect the experiences of those who are on our teams. So these are thoughts. These are thoughts for leaders, for coaches, as you're thinking about the everyday on your teams. They're the everyday beats of our work.